Field of 68 preseason top 25 presented by Athletic Greens, Gregory. I actually put my my AG1 in smoothies these days, so I'm using my very nice AG1 shaker to drink a little bit of water. I just got a nice workout in. I'm trying to get healthy, trying to get healthy, get this beach body ready for the summer. My name is Rob Dauster. I am here with the one and only Greg Waddell. I was able to pry him away from baby duty, changing diapers. Before we get into this, Greg, how you doing, man? You getting any sleep yet? Brand new father. What is your son's, what, 2 weeks old now?
Yeah, little under 2 weeks, about 11 days right now. I was going to mention we've already, I'm probably oversharing here. We've already moved to formula for our baby. I've been mixing in a little Athletic Greens. It's going great. Start them healthy, start them young. You look great. It's been 2 months since I've seen you. It seems like that end of season extra 5-10 pounds has already come off, Rob. So congrats to you. It's great to be back with you.
It actually has. I'm not going to tell anybody what I was weighing after I got back from the Final Four, but it was one of those ones where you step on the scale and you look at it and you go, oh, fuck, I messed up. So, yeah, we're trying to get back in shape over here, Greg. You know how it is. We are also going to unveil the Field of 68 consensus top 25. The legwork was done by our own Mike Miller. We compiled the Athletics, the ESPN, the CBS, the Sports Illustrated, Mike Miller's The Daily Preseason Top 25. We put all of this together and we figured out pretty much what the consensus national top 25 is. We will get into all that. Before we do, Greg, let's just talk a little bit through what our Field of 68 preseason top 25 is. And I guess we could take this in kind of segments. We'll start Kansas, Duke, Purdue, Michigan State. Those are our top four. I think that is more or less the consensus top four. You'd have a very tough time convincing me any of those four don't belong in the top four nationally. If I was going to put together a Field of 68 bracket projection, if you will, I think those would be my four number one seeds. Tell me why I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. I feel like there is clear separation for this season that is upcoming where there hasn't been the last few years, at least going back 2-3 years in my memory. I don't really remember consensus going back to the Gonzaga team with Chet Holmgren. But it's almost been like there's one favorite. It's not like there's been a group of favorites, even in the past years where there was a little separation. This year, it's like there's a top tier, and you can have different teams that you prefer, but it's all personal preference. I think those four are equally, I guess, in line to own a spot in that top four. We're going to break down who we would individually have here, I think, in just a moment. But to me, you can't leave any of the four of them out for various reasons. I think Kansas seems like it's the consensus nationally from what I've seen. I was a little surprised with our Field of 68 daily top 25 that Mike Miller, the lovely Mike Miller runs, who is a Kansas fan. He didn't have Kansas at number one. That felt a little bit like a reverse jinx to me because that's the number one team I've seen everywhere.
Yeah, it really was a reverse jinx. We're calling Mike out on that. And I think that he would very gladly admit that he is reverse jinxing that. We're going to get much deeper into this conversation about whether or not Purdue is a legit number one contender and why we're not talking about Michigan State more. That's coming up here in a second. That, folks, is what we call a tease in the business, in the media business, in the podcast business. The rest of the top 25, we have Marquette at 5, Houston at 6, FAU at 7, Tennessee at 8, Creighton at 9, Gonzaga at 10. I don't think there's anything there that really stands out to me. It was interesting in the consensus top 25. Florida Atlantic was all over the map. They were as high as number 4 on some ballots. They were as low as 17 on some ballots. And I don't know. How do you feel about them? Where do you stand on Florida Atlantic? They are a tough team for me to kind of peg because they were so good last year and they made the run to the Final Four. But it's also a mid-major. Like every time I feel like we overhype these mid-majors, it never ends up leading to them having that same kind of season the next year.
Yeah, I think the question is, are they more Wichita State-y or are they more St. Bonaventure-y from just a couple years ago where everybody was kind of like, should we really put the Bonnies in the top 10? And then they just had a horrible season. I don't know. Like, I think it's fair and probably correct to have them in the top 10 heading into this season, mostly because we are in an era where we just saw the benefits of age and the benefits of continuity lead to success for four teams that made it to a Final Four. And I think going into next year, like this offseason seems even crazier than last year's offseason as far as turnover, as far as guys jumping around from contender to contender, chasing the bag. And I'm not saying that's bad for the game, but I am saying the teams that have avoided that to a significant degree, I think we'll reap the benefits of that. Florida Atlantic being one of the best at that in my mind, as far as who they're returning, as far as the success they had last year. So I'm in. I think I'm a little higher on them than most. Like, I would not shudder if you have this team like 6th or 7th overall. I would not put them lower than 10th. So I'm very comfortable with us with the number 7 ranking.
Yeah, I think that that's the sweet spot for them, right? It's to me, I don't think that they're better than Marquette. I have a very difficult time betting against Houston. It feels very uncomfortable having a Houston team outside the top 5 heading into the preseason based on what they've done in recent years. But I'm not totally sold on Tennessee. I'm not totally sold on Creighton. I'm not totally sold on Gonzaga. The rest of the top 25 we'll get into. There's a lot of question marks for all these teams. So I'm good with it. They went 35-3 yet last year, and they made a Final Four, and they bring everybody back in an era when everybody transfers. So let's go. I'm all in on the Owls. And I promise, Greg, I'm not at all biased because they're a part of the Field of 68 tip-off. Not at all. I'm not trying to build up hype for that event at all. Nope. No, wouldn't be me. Couldn't be me. All right. 11, Miami, 12, UConn, 13, Texas, 14, St. Mary's, 15, Villanova. All pretty straightforward there. The Villanova one might surprise some people. We have a Big East lean on the Field of 68 with myself and Fanta and T.O., who has now designated himself a Big East guy. So being in on Villanova is not something that should shock anybody. The next 5, North Carolina at 16, Texas A&M at 17 is a very interesting one. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. USC at 18 with Isaiah Collier, Boogie Ellis, and of course, Bronny James, who may or may not be transferring to TCU to follow his dad to the Dallas area, unless you've been paying attention to the Kyrie Irving rumors of recent days. Arizona at 19, Arkansas at 20, and then rounding out the top 25, we have San Diego State, Baylor, Colorado, Illinois, and the Johnnies. 5 Big East teams in the top 25. Again, don't be shocked to see us hyping up the Big East all season long. I love the Big East. I am going to be very upset if and when UConn decides to leave.
Yes, I was going to say, soak it up while you can, right? Is that what we're doing here?
Yes, I'm leaning all the way in. I'm just going to try to make David Benedict, UConn's athletic director, feel as guilty as possible if he's going to pull the trigger on this move. You got to rub it in, man. You got to fight for what's right, okay? You got to fight for what's right, Greg. All right. So the way that we're going to do this episode, it's a little bit different. We've done this on the DTF podcast before. You haven't done this on the show with us, Greg. I have a timer. It is set for 4 minutes right there. You can see it. The people listening, I'm holding it up to the camera. We have 4 minutes on the timer. There are 7 topics that we're going to get into. We are going to talk about each of these topics for 4 minutes. Once that alarm sounds, we're done and we're moving on. We're going to start, Greg, with this. Is Purdue a legitimate contender for number 1? Or should the conversation only be limited to Duke and Kansas? Go.
I think they absolutely are. And I am starting to think they should be more people's number 1 than they are. I personally would have them second right now. I would put Kansas 1. I would put Purdue 2. But I think people seem to be shrugging off Zach Edey's return, which is one of the more annoying reactions that I've had to any sort of news break in the last calendar year. Zach Edey was so good last year. It was a historically dominant National Player of the Year season. Not even just like he won National Player of the Year. Of course, he was good. Rank it against other National Player of the Year seasons, I think he's near the top. And now he's back, and it seems like because they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson, everyone is just willing to throw them in the category of, well, this is just what Matt Painter teams do. They'll be good in the regular season. They'll lose in the tournament. Yes, they lost a couple other high-seeded teams in the tournaments before this. It's now a string of 3 straight, 13 seeds and up. I get that. But next year's Purdue team is not last year's Purdue team. Specifically in the backcourt, it's the same faces, but Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are going to get so much better than they were. There's a reason why
I say this all the time, Greg. There's a reason why coaches say the best thing about freshmen is that they become sophomores, right?
Right. And Fletcher Lawyer hit a wall last year. That was the biggest problem for Purdue. The guy that was Fletcher Lawyer through January was not the guy the final 2 months of the regular season. And remember, this Purdue team was blowing teams out in the non-conference last year when these guys were 2 weeks in to their college careers. I still think the sky's the limit. They got Miles Colvin on the wing, another freshman who is extremely athletic. That's an upgrade for them in a spot they really needed. A more athletic, a little more speed, a little defense there. So I think this team has a fair shot, a fair argument at being number 1 overall. And of the top 4, Rob, they're the team that I would be most surprised if they didn't end the season on the one line.
Yeah, I mean, they won the Big East, the Big Ten regular season. They won the Big Ten tournament, and if it wasn't for, I'm just going to call it a fluky end to the NCAA tournament for them, I think people would have a very different feeling about this group. But you also got to remember, throughout much of last season, it was like the exact opposite of what we're doing right here, right? Like we were trying to talk people off the ledge of saying Purdue's the best team in college basketball. Purdue's going to win it all. Purdue this, Purdue that, Purdue everything, right? So it's amazing to me how the kind of narrative and public perception of this team has flipped. What I will say is this: I am higher on Duke than I think just about anybody is. I have Duke number 2. I think that they are right there with in the same conversation with Kansas for preseason number 1. I would not be shocked to see a situation where Kyle Filipowski and Tyrese Proctor are both first team All-Americans, right? I mean, Filipowski averaged, we talk about Zach Edey coming back. Filipowski averaged 15 and 10 as a freshman, and he's coming back to school as a guy that was a projected, top 20, 25 pick in the draft. Tyrese Proctor could be a top 10 pick in next year's draft. He's coming back as a sophomore. He was terrific. He had the opposite of the Fletcher Lawyer season. He was kind of sucked early. He was really good late in the year. So I think if those two guys take the leap that I'm expecting them to make, I think that Duke has a much higher ceiling. The one thing I would say about Purdue is this, and you got about 30 seconds to respond to me. Where are the pros? And can you win in college basketball if you don't have a roster with at least some NBA players on it?
Yeah, I think you absolutely can. And I mean, look, they don't have a ton of pros unless Colvin really is a lot better than people think he's going to be right away. I will say, I know you saw the video. Zach Edey's agility at the NBA Combine was a little eye-opening to me, man. I'm not writing him off. No, I look, it's different styles, right? You can make a flip argument of Duke of like they're too young. Like you can nitpick anything here. Don't nitpick Purdue. They're going to be dominant.
There it is. All right, moving on. Question number 2. We just talked about Kansas, the consensus number 1 team in the country. We just talked about Purdue, and we just talked about Duke. Those are 3 of the 4 teams that we mentioned as the consensus top 4. Michigan State more or less brings everybody back from last season, right? They lose Joey Hauser, who was good, but he's a replaceable piece. Sorry, Joey, but you are. They bring back their backcourt. They bring back Tyson Walker. They bring back AJ Hogarth. They bring back Jaden Akins, who I think is going to be on a lot of breakout star lists this season. Plus, they had a recruiting class that includes Xavier Booker, Jeremy Fears, and maybe the best athlete in college basketball in Cohen Carr. So let me ask you this. As a Michigan fan, Greg, why are we not talking more about Michigan State?
I think we're not talking about Michigan State because it's not always a great thing for an okay to good team to bring everybody back. And you mentioned Joey Hauser. You called him a replaceable guy. I don't think he is a replaceable guy, for the record. I think his shooting was really the identity of that team last year between him and Tyson Walker and Jaden Akins. Like that was 43% type shooters the entire season. You lose one of them, they're not going to replace him with a shooter. I mean, you're going to hope Malik Hall makes shots, but his confidence and post-injury stuff at the end of last season is a little scary. I just think it's almost a case where I've made this argument before and I get laughed at by Michigan State fans, but I almost would have liked it if one of their backcourt members departed and maybe opened the door for a larger role for Jaden Akins, who is the guy I believe is the next level talent in that group. Now, you don't want that guy to be Tyson Walker because he's going to be first team all Big Ten. He's one of the clutchest players in America. He's got to return. You can do the math on who maybe the departure could have been. But look, this team is going to be really good. They need to somehow make a jump, though. Like, I need to see the reason why they're better than just a team that lost 13 games last season and 13 games the year before that. They got Tom Izzo. He's doing it his way. It's incredible. This recruiting class that's freshmen, they just need one of them to pop. They don't need all 3 of Booker, Fears, and Cohen Carr to pop. They just need one to be a starter caliber player, and you got to love the core that they have in place.
Yeah, I think that for me, I think a little bit too much expectation is getting put on Xavier Booker, right? I don't think that there's really anybody coming into this freshman class that is going to be somebody that changes what any college basketball team is. for the better, right? You don't want to have to rely on freshmen to be playing major roles this season. It's just not a very good freshman class. It is what it is. For him to come in and be asked to play a role where at the start of the year, you're probably looking at like 10 to 15 minutes a game for him, right? Earn some playing time, earn some minutes. All of a sudden, he kind of figures out what he's doing defensively. You put a little strength on him. You could put him at the 5 next to Malik Hall with those 3 guards that we talked about, and you got a lineup that looks really dangerous and frankly, like a lot of fun. I think your point about having teams that bring back a bunch of guys that were just okay, the continuity factor, I think is 100% spot on. I mean, how much did we see that last year with teams like TCU, with teams like Creighton, who were like preseason top 10 kind of teams and ended up being exactly what they thought we would be. Both of them were 6 seeds last year, kind of like top 25-ish, back end top 25-ish kind of teams. That's kind of what I think the floor is for Michigan State this year. All that said, you got maybe the best backcourt in college basketball, right? Mm-hmm. How many are better than them? I don't know if there is anybody better than them. Tyson Walker makes big shots. Jaden Akins, stud. AJ Hoggard, if he's your 3rd best guard, you have a very, very good backcourt. And get that guy Tom Izzo. You know, the one thing I will say is that when he's hyped up, they tend to deliver, right? Michigan State teams tend to deliver. You got 30 seconds. Respond. Take us home.
No, you're right. I think you've got to identify one element that you think takes a leap in order for them to go from a team that was outside the top 25 much of last season to a top 5 caliber team. And to me, it's depth. Last year, their bench was essentially unplayable. This year, between Booker and Fears and Carr, they're going to have options there. And 2, it's can they figure out the center spot? Mady Sissoko was fine. They need someone.
Remember how good he was for like a week?
Well, yeah, I mean, once the scouting report was out on him that he was not a threat whatsoever, that fell apart a little bit.
Yeah, it was fun when Mady Sissoko was the thing. Like it was the Champions Classic and then one more game, and then everybody forgot about him.
He had that Euro step against Kentucky. He looked like Giannis, and then right? Never seen again.
Yep, and then he died. All right, so question number 3: who is the best team in the Big East? You have the reigning national champions in UConn. You have the reigning Big East regular season and tournament champions in Marquette. You have Creighton, who got back Trey Alexander, who got back Ryan Kalkbrenner, who added Stephen Ashworth out of the portal. And you kind of quietly have Villanova, who's sneaking up on a lot of people. I don't think people realize quite how good that team's going to be. Who is the best team in the Big East?
So I really wish that I could say Creighton because I was a Creighton defender all of last season. And I think if I was a Creighton fan, I'd be one of the most frustrated fans on earth. And that's coming from a Michigan fan. So take that for what it's worth. But listen, for them to have to sit and watch Arthur Kaluma and Ryan Nembhard go play college basketball again for different programs when this team was an iffy foul call away from a date with a team they probably are better than in the Final Four, that would just be such a sour taste in my mouth. And yes, they're still going to be really good. You get Kalk back, you get Alexander back, Shireman back. Those are dudes, and they did make good additions. But I've got a hard and fast rule, Rob. When you lose a Nembhard as a college basketball team, that's a really, really hard thing to replace, no matter how talented your roster looks on paper. I think this league goes through the champs. I think the king is on the throne until they're unseated. And I'm excited to get your take on this because, a very wise UConn fan once said they're a little concerned about UConn's leadership for next season, Rob Dauster. That's what I saw from the Field of 68 Twitter.
So it's not that I'm concerned with it. It's that I don't know where it's going to come from, right? You lost the 3 guys that were kind of the identity of that team with Andre Jackson, Jordan Hawkins, and Adama Sanogo. Andre was the leader in the locker room. Adama Sanogo was kind of like the leader by example, guy that you can run things around. And Jordan Hawkins set the toughness example, right? That guy didn't say a word, but he played through every injury. Tristan Newton, as good as he is this laid back Southern dude, real chill from El Paso. He's not like the vocal gonna get everybody fired up. He's just kind of laid back, right? Is it going to be Donovan Clingan? Can he play that role? Can you have a 5-man that's a sophomore, one of the younger guys on the team, be someone that can kind of take over that role? Is it Alex Kerman? That's that's kind of what I'm looking for. And also they need shooting on the perimeter, right? Like I love what Solo Ball could be long-term. I think he's going to be best as a sophomore or a junior. I think UConn's got to get Cam Spencer out of the portal. I think that is a very big addition for them. And outside of that, I probably have them just on the outside of the top 25. I will say this, agree with everything you said about Creighton. Think they're going to be really good. Think they're going to be a better shooting team than they were last year. I have questions about how they replace Kaluma. That's a big one for them. And then Marquette losing Omax. You know, I think that they are going to be able to withstand that better than Creighton and UConn can withstand the losses that they took, because David Joplin's a guy that's ready to have a big, big season, because Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek are so creative in things that they do offensively. And because, remember this name, Chase Ross, I think we'll be able to fill that role defensively that Omax provided. I will say this about Villanova. If they are going to be a team that can win the Big East regular season title, they need Mark Armstrong to be a dude. They need him to live up to like his 4-star crazy athlete kind of hype. Because if you are going to trust Justin Moore to be your full-time, like only point guard, only ball handler, Greg, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah, I'm going to bite my tongue without saying too much on Villanova, because I believe we have a segment later in the show that I'd like to speak on. It's a fine roster. It's a good roster. There's a lot of dudes. They are not first, second, or third on my list of Big East teams that I think are threats. I want to ask you this. As the Big East guy, I want to ask you this. Who's the preseason Big East Player of the Year? Is it Kolek running away? No question.
Preseason, I think it's Tyler Kolek. Postseason, I am betting my money that it's going to end up being Donovan Clingan, because I think that he's going to be a guy that averages 15 points, 10, 11 boards, 3.5 blocks, and be the anchor of a team that, for my money, will be a top 5 defense in college basketball and probably a top 10 to 15 team. So I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up being Clingan. But don't forget Bryce Hopkins down in Providence. I think he's gonna have a monster season.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not gonna let the alarm go. We're counting down the minutes there. All right. Question number 4. There are 3 teams that have a gap of at least 16 spots in the consensus preseason top 25. Arizona, San Diego State, and Villanova all had at least one person rank them in the top 10. They also all had at least one person leave them unranked in the preseason top 25s. Top 25s vibes. That was weird. Anyway, Arizona, out of Arizona, San Diego State, and Villanova, which of those teams do you trust the most?
Oh boy. None of them. Can I say that? I mean, if I have to, gun to my head, I'll take San Diego State. Wow. It doesn't feel good to say that, but again, I think I'm pretty clear. I'm down on Villanova here. I'll go more on that later. And it's impossible to say the team with Caleb Love is the team you trust the most. It just is. Like we've now seen this for 2 seasons. Like if it goes well, they're in the national championship game. If it goes horribly, they're not in the NCAA tournament. That's going to be the thing with a team that's built around him. I think San Diego State, like, they do bring enough pieces back that there's an infrastructure that you know what you're going to get from them. You're going to get elite defense. You're going to get a team that's really well connected. You're going to get a well-coached group that's old as shit. And that matters in college basketball right now. They're going to win a ton of conference games and be one of the toughest outs come postseason play in the entire country. So that's the known quantity there to me out of those 3 teams. I think there's more unknowns with Arizona and with Villanova than there are with San Diego State.
Yeah, so San Diego State is the one to me that I don't really understand why there's that big of a gap, right? They're the team that I kind of look at them and say, yeah, you know what? They're probably going to be pretty good. They're probably not going to be this top 10 kind of a team. They're probably not going to be the team that runs it back and makes another run to the Final Four. Like, they're just going to be – they're not going to be this ceiling San Diego State. They're going to be that team that goes like 11-5 in the Mountain West, wins the regular season title by like half of a game, and doesn't score more than 60 points the entire season. They're just very like kind of okay, fine to me, right? I understand Arizona having that big of a gap. To me, Villanova is the one that you got to trust the most here. And the red flag, the concern that I have is that Jay Wright, to me, was one of the best teachers of basketball that you're ever going to find. I think that his ability to get guys to understand how he wanted them to play, and get them to buy into their concepts and their schemes. And they didn't run plays when Jay Wright was there, right? They had their concepts. They had things that they did. It was basically just simple basketball: drive, draw a second defender, find somebody open, make a three, attack a closeout, get into the paint, jump stop, pivot, either take a shot or find somebody to create another closeout opportunity, right? They didn't run offense. They just played. And I think that Kyle is trying to do something similar. And I'm not sure that he's that level of teacher of the game, right? I would be willing to bet on the talent there, but it's also, you got a bunch of new faces, man. Like, when was the last time we saw Villanova? I ran the numbers the other day. In Jay Wright's last 10 seasons as head coach, they brought in a total of 4 transfers. Kyle Neptune this offseason is bringing in 4 transfers. It's a complete departure from what we expect Villanova to be. And you got to give Kyle credit for adjusting to the times and buying into the ideas of what you need to do to be able to succeed in college basketball in 2024. But we've never seen them do it. So that's my big question, right? Like, I'm willing to bet on it, but I need to see Kyle do it before I fully buy into it, where it's like Arizona and Caleb Love, you kind of know what you're getting there. And I have a feeling, I mean, you said it right. There's going to be games where they look like the best team in college basketball. And there's going to be games where they lose by 15 to Stanford or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like Arizona last year too, right? Like, that's not a departure from the group we had last year with Kirk Risa.
You're so right, man. Shit. Like, you're so right. Arizona's they're going to be the worst team to bet on. You know what? Can we make an agreement right now? I need you to hold me to this.
Oh, God.
We are not allowed to bet on Arizona basketball games next season.
I can't make that agreement. I'm in love with Tommy Lloyd teams. I bet them every game last year. You know who my title pick was pre-tournament. But okay.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why I'm reminding you of that. So Villanova, though, looking at Kyle Neptune and what he did last season, because I'm with you, like, it's unknown.
Wait, hold on. So I think I know what you're going to go with here. Okay. The next question that we have is the most overrated team in our consensus top 25. And I have a feeling that you are going to say that it is Villanova.
It is, but before I give my reasoning, I want you to answer this for me, because there's so many unknowns with Kyle Neptune still. I'm with that. We have to give him a couple of years. One season's not enough. Just answer this for me. Do you think that last year's Villanova roster, even with the injuries, like who they had available for certain games, do you think that 17-17 was in the middle of outcomes for that roster and what they should have gone? Do you think that's worse than they should have been?
Yes.
Me too. Like, I think there was more than enough for a 20-win team on that team last season, and it didn't come close, even when they were fully healthy at the end of the season, and they turned a little bit of a corner. It never got to the point that I wanted to see that. So if you need to call me a Kyle Neptune skeptic or a hater, whatever you want to call it,
well, you should be. You should.
Right,
it's not like you should be at this point. Maybe skeptic is too strong of a word, I think, but like, he needs to prove it. Like, there's no doubt about it. He needs to prove it. And that's why when I say I think the key to their season is going to be Mark Armstrong, right? It's going to be the point guard spot. You need a guy that can be the player that gets that first paint touch, that creates the tidal wave of everything else, that makes everything else go, right? What they tried to do with it last year was have Caleb Daniels or Justin Moore or Cam Whitmore, all these guys like dribble into post-ups, and they're not Jalen Brunson. Right? Like, Jalen Brunson could do that. Colin Gillespie could do that. Ryan Arcidiacono could do that. You can't do that with Caleb Daniels. And I don't think you want Justin Moore to be the guy that does that. But you get him back as the secondary ball handler, the star, the scorer, with Mark Armstrong next to him, with a guy like Eric Dixon, who, by the way, is a fucking alpha. Like, that dude is a stud, right? With these new pieces coming in that you can kind of surround them with length, athleticism, versatility, all that. If Mark Armstrong lives up to the potential, I think you have a team that can be very, very good, and good enough to overcome a similar kind of coaching performance to last year. And like, I don't want to take shots at Kyle, because I think it's too early to really do that and to say, like, we have a feel for what he is. But I do think that he needs to prove himself. Like, this is the year to prove yourself. You know what? Does that make sense?
100%. He has to prove it. And I made this point last week on a different show, but Really good coaches can have really bad seasons. And I don't think that's talked about enough. It's about how you overcome that. How does it change from year to year? Like we can identify and isolate the best coaches in this game and point out horrible seasons they've had. Now, I think Kyle Neptune's first year was about as low on that spectrum as you'd want to go to believe that he's still a good coach. But he's had a really good offseason by all accounts. My problems with your theory on Mark Armstrong are, one, I don't really believe in Mark Armstrong. I mean, the guy didn't have a great assist rate. I'm not really buying a breakout season from him if he needs to be the straw that stirs the drink. Two, for all the guys they went and got in the portal, are you really telling me they couldn't just get a true point guard from the portal that would have alleviated all these concerns? That's a little more proven, that we know who that is. Like, I would much rather have a veteran point guard than I would rather have Hakeem Hart and TJ Bamba and Tyler Burton. And those guys are all good players, but they're not necessarily alphas that I trust to be number ones on a really good basketball team. I think they've got a bunch of good players and a coach that had some good players last year and didn't get a ton out of them. That's a really scary recipe for me when I think they're still going to have some identity concerns next season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Can I throw another overrated team to you that I don't really understand the ranking of them?
Please.
Texas A&M.
Ooh, okay. Talk to me there.
They are 12th in the consensus top 25. I understand Wade Taylor's coming back. I understand they got Tyrese Radford coming back. I understand that Buzz Williams, like, you hit year 5 and that's kind of when they hit their peak. I just don't see it. Right. I don't see. What about that roster scares you? What about that roster intimidates you? You look at some of these other teams in the SEC, and I'm not fully in on like Arkansas. I'm not fully in on Alabama. But those look like those to me, those are better teams than what Texas A&M is. I don't understand why they are a top 12 team in college basketball.
I think it's got to be because from December 27th on, they were 19-5 last season, and they bring I mean, that's a team in SEC play that had that record. So it's not like they were, beaten up on a mid-major conference or something like that. I think I'm with you. Like, I view Texas A&M as one of the most overachieving teams in the sport last season, more so than I view them as like they built the foundation for what is going to be an awesome banner hanging year this season. And I think that's evidenced by their performance at the end of the season when they went up against some of the better teams in the country, or at least, Alabama lose by 20 in the conference tournament, and then first NCAA tournament game just blown out by a Penn State team that was really playing good ball. So I'm with you. I like that as a skepticism pick. I think they're still a tournament lock, but I don't think it's a team that does anything special.
Yeah, and shout out to you for going right through that alarm. Exactly what I do when I'm trying to wake up in the morning. All right. Second to last question. Question number 6 here. Who is the most underrated team in the not in the field of 68 top 25, in the consensus preseason top 25 for you?
So I struggle with this because I don't love a lot of the teams at the bottom of this list, to be honest with you. But the number one that I just keep coming back to is a team that's roster is still far from finished right now. But I'm just taking the infrastructure of their program and who their head coach is and what they've done in recent years. I'm taking Scott Drew. I'm taking Baylor. I don't think this is a team that's going to be a fringe top 25 team for long next season. I know they lost a ton. I think this is their weakest roster going back to their national championship year and years before that. But they've got dudes that I trust the talent level of. And in that system, we know we're going to get production from their guards. Ray J. Dennis was an absolutely critical add. I think Langston Love is primed for a breakout season. And they still have work to do, as we said. The Olivier Kamwa's decision is coming. It sounds like that could be trending to Baylor. He's a winning guy who plays both ends and doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands. So if I have to pick one from that group, I'm going to pick the coach I trust most to figure it out with a bunch of pieces I like. It's almost the inverse of Villanova, right? Like, that's a bunch of pieces. Do I trust the guy to put the puzzle together? I don't with Kyle Neptune. I do with Scott Drew.
So my pick is something that's kind of similar. I think it's Alabama for me, right? And I don't think that you can rank them any higher right now in the moment. But I do think that trusting that Nate is going to that Nate Oates is going to find a way to supplement the current roster with some relatively big names that are currently left in the portal is something that I would buy into that idea. Let's just phrase it like that. And I would love a big athletic 4/5 man to come into a team with Mark Sears and with Aaron Estrada. I think that is a terrific backcourt. I think those guys are both old. They're both veterans. They've both proven it at the mid-major level. Mark Sears has proven it to a point at the high major level. And I think that when you combine their shooting ability, their ability to play off the bounce, that's what you want out of an Alabama team. I'm going to throw one more at you. And I want your take on this because I feel like I'm out on a limb here. I feel like I am I'm going to get a lot of criticism for this take because they are number 15 right now in the preseason. But I like North Carolina. I like them quite a bit. I like the idea of having RJ Davis and Armando Bacot be your two stalwarts and then filling in all the pieces around them with the likes of Paxton Wojcik and Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingham and Jalen Withers and Elliot Cadeau. I think Jalen Washington is going to have a big year. I think Seth Trimble is going to be be in a position where he can kind of have a breakout season. Like I like what has come together on this roster. The big question is going to be, do you trust Hubert Davis to figure it all out? And I kind of do. I kind of do. I think the reason why I say that is I think he's leaning into this idea that, hey, look, we need to get that guy out of here. Caleb Love, he's gone. RJ Davis, put the ball in his hands. Give him some help with Seth Trimble. Give him some help with Elliot Cadeau. Trust that Armando Bacot's going to be your stud and get some shooters around them. And that's what he went out and did.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point on Hubert. Like, I'll compare him to Juwan Howard here of like, they've had teams that have underachieved in the regular season the last couple of years. And Hubert successfully navigated a dicey situation and really, in my opinion, had about the best offseason he could have had. Whereas Juwan has had the worst possible. Like, he lost the star player. He lost the identity. He didn't bring in high school recruits. He hasn't successfully gotten transferred. Like, Hubert has done it all. And I think the Cadeau reclassification is maybe the most interesting part of that roster for me. Like, if he's a day one guy who really fits in well as a pass first elite vision type and lets RJ Davis hunt the shots, I love the makeup of that roster. And I'm with you. I think it could be some addition by subtraction there.
I think you need Cadeau to be the complementary piece. Let RJ be the guy. Let Cadeau be the creator. Similar to Tristan Newton and Andre Jackson, similar to when it was Joel Berry playing with Theo Pinson and when North Carolina won it in 2017, right? I have a very difficult time buying all the way in on freshmen, period, especially freshmen that are reclassifying up. All right, you got 1 minute to answer this question. Who is the best team outside of the consensus preseason top 25?
All right, I'm going to give you one here. I think this is going to shock you because nobody's talking about this team. And yes, it's in my Big Ten. I'm taking Maryland here, Rob, because I love Jameer Young. I think he's awesome. I think he was extremely awesome for the final 2 months of last season. And I think that we've seen a lot of these up transfer point guards really have breakout seasons in year 2 at their school, like Jalen Pickett did last season. Jameer Young, I expect to take a leap beyond what he was at the end of last year, which was a top 4 player in that conference. You're pairing him with a guy, a true freshman, in Deshaun Harris-Smith, who I absolutely love the talent level of. I think he could potentially be a one and done, kind of a Jalen Hood-Schifino type impact on this team. And if that hits, that's one of the best backcourts in the country. They got their front court back, Julian Reese and Dante Scott. Yes, they lost Hakeem Hart. That would have been a really nice fifth piece on the wing, but I think they've got enough bodies they can interchange there off the bench. That core of 4 with the 2 guys in the front court, the 2 guys in the backcourt, I absolutely love. And I'd be shocked if by the end of the season, this team is not in the 15 to 25 range in the polls.
So I'm going to stick in the Big Ten. I'm going to go with Illinois. I just think that there is too much talent on that roster to not be preseason top 25, right? I think getting Jeremiah Williams in is going to be a big one for them because that's another long, athletic dude that can be a playmaker, right? He played a lot on the ball when he was at Temple in the 21-22 season before tearing his ACL. Terrence Shannon's back. Coleman Hawkins back. Dane Danger's back. Ty Rogers, Sincere Harris, Luke Goody all had moments, right? Like it's just that team should be a preseason top 25 team. There's going to be moments where they make you want to put your head through a plate glass window, right? When you watch them. But they are a top 25 team. There's top 25 talent on that roster. They are one of the, I'd say 15 to 20 best teams in college basketball. So having them outside the top 25 is shocking. Last
Here's
thing I
my
want to say.
fear with Illinois, though. Aren't we going to just get point guard Coleman Hawkins? Isn't that a terrifying proposition for a team trying to make the polls?
Yes and no, because I think that Jeremiah Williams coming in will help mitigate that factor. But still, like there's too much talent on that team to have them be outside the preseason. Like, what are we doing here? Come on, consensus. Last thing we're gonna say. Kentucky is in the preseason consensus top 25, which is a fucking joke. They're not a preseason top 25 team. They're a top 25 team.
Top 25 talented roster in the country, right?
I think I've made it clear I don't trust any freshmen in college basketball this year, and I especially do not trust a team that is going to be made up of 5 freshmen and 2 sophomores that didn't prove a damn thing last year. Get Antonio Reeves back, go out and get one of these studs, Arthur Kaluma, Grant Nelson, somebody out of the portal, and then maybe we can have a conversation. But right now, if you are betting all the way, if you're going all the way in on DJ Wagner, Robert Dillingham, Justin Edwards, a maybe healthy, maybe not healthy Aaron Bradshaw, like I can't get behind this. Like they got to prove it. They're going to get their ass kicked early on in the season. Who are they play? Do they have Kansas? Who do they have in the Champions Classic?
It's the one you didn't want to see, right? So Michigan's no. I don't know. I just know your video. You wanted Duke and Kansas, and it's not Duke and Kansas.
Yeah, I can't remember who they're playing. I think they are playing Duke. But whether it's Duke or Kansas, they're going to get their asses kicked. They're going to get lit up in the Champions Classic if they don't add anybody else. They got to add pieces. Listen, Greg, this has been fun. This has been the Athletic Greens preseason top 25. I was drinking water out of it. I had my AG1. I put it in smoothies these days. I'm going to let you go. You got to go change a diaper. That's what your wife is just texting me right now. She said, look, you got to let Greg go. The little boy just pooped all over the place. So go ahead, go handle that. Go get that done, Greg.
It's a terrifying proposition.